Welcome to the Frontier Outposts podcast, episode 3. I'm Martin Cousins and I run an agency called Insights Media. And with me is
Peter Antonin, Antonin Consulting, a strategy boutique.
So yeah, as you can see, it's pretty warm in the UK right now. So we've decided to ease up on the formal attire, not that it was ever formal in the first place. So if you enjoyed the first 2 episodes of the podcast, we are here to talk about AI and how it's impacting on organizations. That's our focus. We're not going into the technology side of it. We're talking about the application. And obviously there's lots of hype. There's lots of stuff going on and at pace. So we're just here to pick up and explore some of that. So Peter, since our last episode, what are the headlines that we've seen and what we kind of dig into today?
Right, Martin. I mean, we've been having conversations over the last kind of couple of days and weeks, as we always do. I'm going to hit you up with quite a major provocation, and you don't have to agree with me, but see if this holds any water. I'm going to go deep on this. I'm going to put it out there. Look, I think we've just had the flare fired on this next phase. I don't know how many phases they're going to be, but on this next phase of the AI revolution. And I'm going to give you the evidence of what I've been picking up on the wire, on the feeds, on the news services over the last kind of 5 to 7 days, and tell me, what you've been picking up and if you agree with this. I've seen 5 chunks, 5 pieces of content, 5 bit of evidence that tell me that now AI has entered the mainstream. I'm not looking for clues, but I see it in so many of the big conversations, socioeconomic, political conversations. Look, I'm going to hit you up with these 5 pieces of content that I've come across. Right. 2 grad ceremonies recently in the States with some big hitters like Schmidt. Boos from the graduate audience that literally just finished their undergraduate courses when AI was mentioned as an opportunity. Okay, look at the CEO, look at Bill Winters of Standard Chartered, who made that remark about low value human capital in his business, which AI was going to replace. And he was riffing off his 7,800 back office staff. And of course, went down well in the room in Hong Kong with the investors. Obviously, once it's gone viral and gone to a more mainstream audience, there's been some kickback on that. Look at Alan Milburn's speech today and yesterday, and look at Tony Blair's speech, both of them explicitly referencing AI. Look at the costs now of AI as they're becoming explicit, as the subsidies are falling off, as people are now, organizations are now starting to understand the real cost of it and understanding the AI cost against the human capital cost. And then look at what's happening in the recruitment sector. Big uptick in the use again of interims, and it's seemingly organizations are now looking for singular individuals, experienced practitioners with one foot in both camps, one foot in tech and systems and one foot in the organization, because now what they're looking to do is for folk to work and facilitate change in those two areas and really understand the impact and the outputs of the work that they're doing. So that's kind of what I'm picking up. So for me, to conclude, I think we're now moving into this next phase, this next era of AI, mainstream, high levels of acknowledgement, understanding, acceptance of AI, and the phony war's over. From when you and I started chatting about a year ago, I think we've now, hitting this new phase. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I would. 2 things occur to me here. One of them is cost reduction, and that was always the promise in so. Yep. And I think that those headlines say it all. It's a lot of what you just said, and the concerns around this technology are based on what that means for my job. And when you've got senior people in organizations focusing on cost reduction and efficiency and process efficiency, that's the conclusion, right? So I think things are moving fast. There's still a lot of hype, but that's the reality, right? And there's a lot of concern and anxiety around that. And I think that's what organizations are grappling with. And I think that, when you've got new entrants to the jobs market, finding it increasingly difficult, and the headlines are that AI is basically removing the need entry level jobs. I think, you know, we do have to pause and reflect about, you know, how we serve people in terms of employment, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think the cost of it is interesting, actually.
Yeah.
It's not, you know, it's not as cheap as everyone was thinking it might be. So actually, to get the benefit is going to take some time. And that is an interesting point for organizations when they're used to seeing solutions almost off the shelf, right?
Yeah.
That's just not happening currently. It's a bit of a messy world. There's a lot happening. It's very dynamic, but there's some big changes and there's structural shifts.
Yeah. Yeah. And on that point, what I thought we'd riff off today is a continuing theme for you and I over the last kind of couple of years, looking at AI, you know, not from, as you say, from a tech point of view, but from a change point of view, from a transformation point of view, from a strategic point of view, and trying to understand how it connects and intersects with several other major vectors, some resolved, some unresolved. So again, bit of a challenge for us to talk through today. And what I'd like to do is touch on, and I don't think there's many right or wrong answers on this, I'd like to touch on how AI intersects with these 5 vectors here. Hybrid working, the L&D challenge, and we might rope in employee engagement into that. The perennial challenge of growth in a low productivity era, both for country and enterprises. And then lastly, innovation, which has always been, in my experience, a little bit patchy in the UK. So again, hybrid working, the L&D challenge, engagement, growth and innovation. And I thought we'd pick off those one by one and just try and understand how AI intersects with those, because I think as part of this whole Frontier program that you and I are doing, I think one of our big asks is for folk never to look at AI in isolation or out of context, but see how it touches on these other major transformational forces that are happening in the current era.
Yeah. And I think, interestingly, there's something common across all of this, right? So hybrid is and has been an absolute headache for organizations, right? And, you know,
in what respect?
Well, you know, it served everyone so well when it had to, right? COVID, those organizations that understood that they could just still get stuff done and had to work in a different way, it proved that we can do that, right? And then everyone relocated. Then they weren't going to an office. And then all of a sudden you've got this whole, we need to get back to the office. And it's really hard for organizations. If 30% of your employees live 2 hours away when they used to live half an hour commute from an office, that's a massive challenge, right? And also all the other commitments that people build around their daily work life. And, you know, so it's been difficult, right? And now you add AI into the mix, and that just makes it more messy. So I think actually the way those two interface, it just creates even more of a challenge. And I don't think it necessarily answers it. And I'll come on to why that is in a minute.
Yeah, because we've now reached a kind of steady state, haven't we, where we understand some difference between sectors, between public and private, between, say, financial services and fintech, where there's a demand to have folk back, and other more mainstream organisations. And you know, last time I looked at the stats, what it seemed to be saying, looking at the traffic counters in the metropolitan areas, it seemed to be saying that we've now hit a kind of 3 out of 5 days, which is the organizational norm, which is normally midweek, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, with a bit of flexibility on the Monday and Friday. So, you know, and for some organizations that's working, and for some it's not. And of course, this is in the context of the trend in the last couple of years for a 4-day week or a 9-day fortnight.
Yeah. So that's just going to, you know, you put AI into the mix of that. You then look at the culture in the organization and the relational aspects of human with human.
Yeah.
Then, you know, I think that will settle somewhere, but I don't think that has settled properly just yet. And I absolutely get the fact that coming together for humans is really important, and understanding why you would be in the office together is kind of different to how it used to be.
Yeah, because the big when hybrid flared up sort of 2 years ago, and the dust settled after COVID, there was the three inarguable, as presented, three inarguable cases for being back in the office, wasn't it? It was about culture, it was about real-time training, and it was about creativity. So I guess our question to each other is, how does AI touch on, if those are the three cases for why folk need to be in something called an office, then how does AI sort of wrap around those three things of culture, real-time face-to-face training, and innovation and creativity?
Yeah, well, I think the answer, and I think to those other vectors you were describing, the answer is absolutely cultural reset, right?
Okay.
And that's what we talk about. That's why we're doing this Frontier program. That's what the offer is here. Because basically, if you're going to look at learning, which is a lever for innovation and growth, if you look at that, you just think, well, actually, you've got to build the culture in order to enable people to innovate and share what they're doing and how they're doing it, right? And I think if you don't have a culture that enables that, then you're going to be kind of doing what you've always done before this kind of AI era, but that's not going to be fit for purpose. That's the whole point, right? So I think it's all about culture. There's something I would just highlight quickly, is this idea of what Microsoft calls a transformation paradox, where workers are ahead of the organization when it comes to use of AI, for example. So at the moment, organizations aren't set up to harness a lot of the innovation that's happening. And that's a cultural issue, right? So I think culture is at the heart of all of this.
Which is why we've constructed this Frontier program, because if we touch on this third vector of engagement, you come from this whole kind of discipline of L&D, organizational change, engagement, and we've been riffing off this for the last decade, and we've kind of seen, in the way that we've phrased it, Martin, we've seen this dilution of what we call the social contract, which from when we were grunts in the early stages of our work, there was never too much question about the kind of work ethic. Is you had mouths to feed, you had mortgages to pay. Folk kind of started working at kind of 16, and they got kind of oven ready by their mid-20s, and then they got on the kind of greasy poles and worked their way through. Whereas now, folks have obviously, there's demographic changes, different values, different cultures, etc. But even before COVID and even before AI rolled into town, you and I have been talking to folk about the problem of engagement. And if that social contract has been weakened, you can see how something like AI, unless it's dealt with with high levels of trust, with high levels of openness, with an authorized facilitated program, which looks at the kind of cultural levers as well, you can see why folk might be distrustful of where the organization is going. So, I don't know where you sit on those kind of challenges.
Well, that Microsoft research also showed that there's greater impact around the AI, organizational factors around AI, rather than individual activity, right? So when you had manager support, a strong culture around AI, and kind of decent people practices, then there was more impact from AI than versus people just using AI individually. And I think this is the point that's at the heart of it. You can't, collectively and culturally, that's where you will see the impact, right? But it's the culture, so the culture binds people together, and it crosses everything. It's engagement, but it's trust, it's learning, it's all of these things. And I think it's a bit of a messy area, but so far research shows us that having a group of individuals around the business being really good with AI is not the answer here.
Yeah, there's a build on what you just said. I've just had some thoughts. Maybe what we're putting down here, Martin, is a bit of a gauntlet to organisations, and you and I have always been somewhat delightfully sceptical of many organisations. And to be fair, we've worked on many of these programs ourselves, being a little bit skeptical and cynical of organizational mission statement and purpose statements, because it's always the 7 to 10 common adjectives and adverbs, and you certainly wouldn't want to disagree with many of them. You certainly wouldn't want to be a dishonest organization. But what I'm trying to say here is are we putting down a gauntlet to organizations and leadership teams to say, right, AI is a wonderful acid test against the robustness and the authenticity of your value system? Because let's look at those 6 or 7 nouns, adjectives, adverbs you've got in your mission statements. And if you're being true to yourself and true to your values, where do you now sit with regards to AI, with regards to the way you talk about it, to the way that you're going to resource it, to the way that you're going to take your people with you, to the way that you're going to have those conversations?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think this is why I think it's a great opportunity for organisations. I don't want this to be sounding like it's just so messy and difficult that it's not going to be delivered well, or change is going to be hard. Change is hard and messy and takes time, but actually we have one unifying thing here for organisations and more broadly for society, as you said right at the top of the episode. And I think that's what the hook is, right? Everyone's thinking about it to some extent. Some will be excited, some will be really fearful. There's a lot of anxiety, but how are you going to have that conversation with all of your colleagues around what that means for them and the organisation and where the organisation is going? That seems to me to be at the heart of this.
You've got to have that conversation. I can't foresee any type of meaningful, sustainable transformation that's going to happen without those difficult conversations, and that better be done by the folk that have kind of got real experience in this and not done tokenistically, and
I think that that's
see how it pans out. But picking up on what you just said about, go on.
And I think all I was going to say was that you have to be aware of the people that know how to innovate their jobs the best are the people.
I've just frozen here.
It's okay. We'll just carry on going, right? It will catch up. So all I was going to say was,
okay.
What I was going to say was the best people to innovate their work or their processes are the people that do the work, right? And that's the opportunity for the organization, is to actually really bring everyone together and be exploring what that looks like now and into the future, rather than outsourcing the thinking to some big consultancy. You've really got, this is the time where you really deeply understand how your organization works and how it's going to shift. So I think that's a cultural thing, and that's where you have engagement. So I think that would be the approach, I think, right now.
Okay. Well, ending on a high point, these last 2 vectors of growth and innovation, and so we're talking about a change of era and the next phase. I think probably the next phase will be tangibly marked by a move into genuine innovation and real-time sustainable growth. I think we've seen the kind of phony war elements of that and the prelims on that, where we've seen that, like, one side of the equation, the cost savings and the substitution kind of work. Okay, but I think the next phase will be marked by creative, intelligent use of AI to move into new categories, to develop new products. And I think the way AI will be used on that intelligently will be to accelerate what could be quite a laborious, L&D or R&D process. So I think it's going to speed up ideation. It's going to democratize it. But I think, yeah, that will definitely, once we move out of this sort of first wave of cost cutting and substitution, I think that this will mark phase 3, if you like, of the real growth. Look, we've already seen some ideas of where this could go with these alleged unicorn status AI startups with a team of 6 and valuations in excess of $1 billion. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really important to focus on, what change can be brought in organizations through, this kind of innovation, the creativity. This is really interesting and exciting, right? But I will come back to my point that you're going to have all the tech companies, the interesting, new startups that are doing fantastic things. You've got all that, but you've also got all the organizations that are employing most of the people in the country. What are they doing, right? What does it look like there? And I think that's a really exciting place too, actually. If you can, manage what we've discussed in this episode in terms of, some of those big challenges, actually, if you can basically cut through all of that by talking about that innovation. It's just like, well, how are we going to get from here to there? What are we doing? Who's doing what? How? I think that's really exciting.
And what are we going to conclude, Martin? Are we going to conclude that there's no way for organizations to get into the real gains of long-term sustainable productivity, innovation, NPD, growth, unless now they set up the parameters, the foundations for the things which you just riffed off? Open, transparent discussion about AI, allowing the hopes and fears to be represented, setting, without getting into bureaucracy, but setting really pragmatic policy statements and expressing what the organizational approach to AI is, the extent to which it's going to be encouraged, resourced, etc. There's no way that we can get into the rare air of the real-time gains of innovation and productivity and growth unless we set up the foundations now.
I could not have put that better myself, Peter. I think that was a really very good summary, actually. And I think, we're trying to keep these episodes to 20 minutes. And if you listened or watched to the last one, you would realise that we went way over our self-imposed time frame. So this one, we've kind of got to about that point. And I think that's a very good place to stop, actually, because it's a great summary. And I think we're just going to be picking up on that in the next episode, especially we're looking at, so what are people doing? How is that innovation beginning to manifest? Hopefully we can start to share some of that with listeners too.
Yeah, good call. Yep. Very happy with that.
Great. So let's just say a huge thanks for listening. And I hope you've enjoyed what we've had to discuss today. It's always a pleasure, Peter, to be able to kick this stuff around with you. And on the outro, you'll see a bit more about our Frontier program. And this is basically, all of this discussion informs that work and, our work in helping organizations kind of guide themselves through the AI challenges and opportunities. So, do get in touch if you want to find out more about that.
Nice one. All right. I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Peter.
Cheers.